The Carolina Panthers are less than a week away from the start of free agency. What are some of their needs that they have, and who are some of the players that could fill those needs? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. The best way to get those questions into me is by either adding me or DMing me, but of course, follow me first on Twitter at Julian Council and get your questions in for tomorrow's episode of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. We sit here less than a week away from the beginning of the 2024 NFL season officially. March 13th at 4 p.m., that is the beginning of the new league year. That is the start of free agency for the Carolina Panthers and the other 31 teams in the NFL. But really, free agency starts in earnest on Monday, March 11th at noon Eastern time. The legal negotiating period, also dubbed as the legal tampering period by many people out there across the league. At that point in time, the Panthers and the rest of the teams in the league can begin negotiating with players, and they can begin signing them to deals. Now, those deals don't become official until Wednesday, March 13th at 4 p.m. Eastern time, but you're going to see on Monday, maybe even right at noon, which would be curious if you do see a report coming out that certain player has signed with a certain team. You're going to start to see those come out on Monday and on Tuesday, and by the time you get to Wednesday, you kind of already know who the top guys, the Panthers and all the other teams in the NFL were going after once free agency officially begins 4 p.m. Eastern time next Wednesday, March 13th. So on today's show, let's look at the offense. Let's look at the defense. Let's look at the needs that they have going to free agency. And let's kind of figure out what kind of players and what value they may have that could fit into Carolina once we get to Monday and then officially get there next Wednesday afternoon. So let's start off with the number one need, and that is at wide receiver. The Carolina Panthers' top priority this offseason is fixing Bryce Young. Now, Dave Canales, a new head coach here in Carolina, says that it's not like Bryce Young has a ton of fixing that he needs to have done. It's just getting the fundamentals right, getting the football right, which is his main focus heading into this 2024 season, but also getting what's around him right. As last year we saw, once the Panthers traded away DJ Moore to get up to number one to take Bryce Young in April, they failed spectacularly in filling out the wide receiver and tight end positions and playmaker positions around Bryce Young. DJ Chark was awful for the Carolina Panthers last year. Hayden Hurst did not work out. Miles Sanders did not work out. Adam Thielen, though, A++ to get over 100 receptions and over 1,000 yards from Adam Thielen in his age 33 season in the NFL. That's great. Everything else, though, was a failure for Scott Fitter and the Panthers, and that's why he's no longer here. That's why Frank Reich, who was a part of the collaborative process, him and Thomas Brown and the all-star offensive coaching staff, that's why all of them, sans Jim Caldwell, are no longer here in Carolina. So the Panthers must find playmakers for Bryce Young. Ideally, they would find a wide receiver one. Now, that's easier said than done, and that was always going to be the case even before some of these moves played out before the beginning of the legal negotiating period and the beginning of free agency. As we know, on Monday, woke up to that Monday morning, Mike Evans, once a buck, seems to be forever a buck. He's going to be staying in Tampa Bay, signing a 2-year, $52 million contract, $35 million in guarantees. Congrats to him, and good job for his agent not coming to Carolina. That was something that felt realistic. It sounds crazy. Mike Evans, lifetime buck, 1,000-yard receiving season every year of his career. Why would he want to come to the Carolina Panthers, a team that just went 2-15? And there are still major questions about their quarterback situation. Now in Tampa, there still are questions for their quarterback situation, as is Baker Mayfield going to stay there? He's not going to take a hometown discount. He could be wanted in Atlanta. New England could want him as well. He may not be a Buck. Now signing Mike Evans might help the Bucks out. That's not great for the Carolina Panthers. But we're moving on from the Baker Mayfield talk. Mike Evans not on the board, but he does love Dave Canales. And Dave Canales being here in Carolina, being able to help Mike Evans be a second-team All-Pro last year would have made it a realistic possibility that the Carolina Panthers would have signed Mike Evans. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs apparently were also lurking. The New York Jets, who have Aaron Rodgers coming off of that Achilles tear, they were also a team that would have been interested in Mike Evans. It was going to be a battle for Mike Evans, whether he was available or not. T. Higgins and Michael Pittman Jr., both of those players, former second-round picks, one going 33rd overall. That's T. Higgins, another going 34th overall. Michael Pittman Jr., they have both been franchise tagged by their respective teams. In Indianapolis, Chris Ballard, the GM up there, he says that Michael Pittman Jr. will be a Colt come September. The Bengals have been a little bit more hush-hush. The league believes that T. Higgins was tagged prior to the combine because the Bengals wanted to get to Indianapolis, start wheeling and dealing, talking to some teams, figuring out what they could get for T. Higgins. Right now, there's no reporting, at least coming from the Bengals camp, that is true, that they're going to trade him. Those two guys currently are off the board unless the Carolina Panthers want to give up some significant capital, especially to get a guy like T. Higgins. The Jags ended up tagging their edge rusher, Josh Allen, which means Calvin Ridley will hit unrestricted free agency. And now that Mike Evans is off the board, T. Higgins is off the board, Michael Pittman Jr. is off the board, he becomes the top free agent wide receiver. And according to multiple reports out there from NFL insiders, teams are ready to pay this man a ton of money. Can the Carolina Panthers afford to do it? They need to be in on that deal, need to be meeting with him as representation. Not quite sure that's going to happen, though, as far as actually getting that across the finish line and getting him to Carolina. Free agency, wide receiver markets, the pickings are slim, man. Odell Beckham Jr., not really a fan of that. He's also a player at this stage in his career who's looking to join a contender, and that is not the Carolina Panthers, so I don't really feel like that's a realistic possibility. The Panthers are probably going to have to be shopping in the second tier of the wide receiver market, and as mentioned before on previous shows, that was likely going to be the case anyways. Mike Evans was going to be the guy I feel like they were going to shell out the money to. Maybe they do that for T. Higgins if he's able to be traded from Cincinnati. Maybe they would have done that for T. Higgins. Same thing with Calvin Ridley. Maybe they do that with Calvin Ridley. I'm not quite so sure. The Panthers don't have a ton of cap space right now to give out a ton of money, and that will be a situation that gets alleviated to a certain extent prior to the new league year. They're under the salary cap, so they're good as far as that goes, but opening up some more space so that they can actually be aggressive and sign some players. They still have a ways to go, as they have $11 million of cap space according to Over the Cap, and $24 million of that has gone away because they had the franchise tag Brian Burns. And that's also a scenario that could be played out this weekend where he gets traded. The Panthers get some draft picks, and they also get that cap space back and can be even more aggressive heading into free agency. Now, looking at the wide receiver market, some of the second-tier guys I'm looking at, Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, probably the top available free agent wide receiver outside of Calvin Ridley. And if you look at some services like PFF, they actually have him rated ahead of Calvin Ridley, so he could be the top wide receiver on the market, and that then complicates things for the Carolina Panthers. Up and down career so far, in Baltimore with the Ravens, and then in Arizona with the Cardinals. Last season, looking at NFL's next-gen stats, didn't have great separation, which is curious for a guy who is known for his speed. Only averaged 2.5 yards separation. His catch percentage was a 50.5%, was the fourth worst in the NFL. So that's a negative. The positives, though, he can create explosive plays, which the Carolina Panthers are desperately needing. He has 28 touchdown receptions on his career resume. 10 of them came on throws of at least 20 air yards. Did we see any of those last season here in Carolina? I think not. Hollywood Brown, he's from Hollywood, Florida. That's why they call him Hollywood. But there's a reason outside of that they call the man Hollywood. He was outstanding at Oklahoma, made some big plays as a rookie in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson. Not as many plays the last couple seasons when he got traded to the Arizona Cardinals, and a large part because of the quarterback situation with Kyler Murray getting injured and have to play with some backups. That is somebody the Carolina Panthers should be interested in and willing to pay a pretty penny to get him here to Carolina. Gabe Davis has been a solid player the last couple of seasons for the Buffalo Bills coming out of UCF. Last year, 47 receptions, 746 yards, 7 touchdowns. He rated 61st out of 128 eligible wide receivers, had a 67.9 overall grade, according to Pro Football Focus. I'm a fan of Gabe Davis. I know after he had that 3-touchdown game against Kansas City Chiefs a couple years ago, there's a large expectation that he was going to step up and really be that number 2 guy to Stephon Diggs. And he was number 2, but the thought was he was going to become a breakout star for Buffalo and that he would not be at this point in time where he's entering free agency, that the Bills would have kept him. Now the Bills are trying to slash a ton of money because they're way over the salary cap and dealing with Josh Allen's contract. That's not helping them out at all right now as they try to maintain as a competitive team. Gabe Davis, though, I think that's an upgrade for the Carolina Panthers based on what they had a season ago. Darnell Mooney, also somebody that I'm very interested in his second season playing in NFL with the Chicago Bears in 2021. He had over 1,000 yards receiving on 81 receptions, a career best 74.9 receiving rating according to PFF. The last 2 seasons, his numbers have not even really matched that. 71 receptions combined, 907 yards, and only 3 touchdowns. Quarterback play has been up and down in Chicago. Now, Justin Fields missed a lot of time this past season, also missed time the year prior to that, which is part of the reason why the Bears are going to move on. That and unfortunately having the Carolina Panthers #1 overall pick. I love Mooney. I think that's a guy who can make some plays. His average yard separation last year was a 3.1. So he has the speed like Marquise Brown, but at least showed it a year ago in Chicago. The Panthers need guys who can get separation, who can make some plays once they catch the ball. Did not have that last year. I think Darnell Mooney is someone who can do that for the Carolina Panthers. So looking at the second tier market of wide receivers, a Hollywood Brown, a Gabe Davis, a Darnell Mooney, a Curtis Samuel, also is out there, potential homecoming here in Carolina. Those are the 3-4 guys that I'm looking at for the Carolina Panthers to try to target once free agency begins. So the wide receiver market, it's dried up a little bit as far as the upper tier guys. And in reality, where are these teams getting these top tier players? Mike Evans, Tampa Bay drafted him. T. Higgins, the Bengals drafted him. They drafted Jamar Chase, who's a better player. Justin Jefferson out there in Minnesota, they drafted Justin Jefferson. Michael Pittman Jr. was drafted in Indianapolis. Calvin Ridley was drafted in Atlanta, then got suspended for a season for gambling on football. People forget that, and ended up in Jacksonville. The best way to get these top tier receivers, and last time the Panthers had one, that was DJ Moore, who they drafted. Steve Smith, way back in the day. That's not that long ago, but still, Steve Smith, he was drafted. Well, God, I guess it has been almost 20 years. Damn. He was drafted here in Carolina. The best way to get your top tier receiver is via the draft. And this is a deep wide receiver class. Maybe the Panthers trade Brian Burns, get back into the first round, can take one of those guys. Would love an A.D. Mitchell in the first round. Would love Keon Coleman if he's there at 33 or in the first round. Of course, would love Rome Odunze. Would love Malik Neighbors. Would love Marvin Harrison Jr. Does not seem that that's going to happen for the Carolina Panthers. So they're going to get an opportunity, though, to draft a wide receiver. They just got to find a veteran to pair with Thielen and whoever they draft, and, of course, a Jonathan Mingo next season to help out Bryce Young. The market that they wanted to have is just not exactly the market that they do have, and that also assumes that the Panthers were going to be a team that was going to be big spenders anyway, had Mike Evans and T. Higgins and some of these other receivers been available. So let's look at the rest of the offensive needs and potential players that could come to Carolina here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because of eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All-in prices show your total up front so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. Buy your tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. The Carolina Panthers' number one priority this free agency and draft is to find playmakers for Bryce Young. They swung and missed big time last year outside of Adam Thielen, and they cannot do that again as Dave Canales comes to Carolina as their new head coach and play caller, hoping to get Bryce Young to play at the level the Carolina Panthers expected out of him last year, but did not surround the requisite talent around him for that to be the case. The Carolina Panthers have not had a tight end capable of making plays in a very, very long time, it feels like. And it really hasn't been that long since Greg Olsen left Carolina. But the last 2 years of his career as a Panther in 2018 and in 19, constantly battling those foot injuries. So really, it's been since 2017 when you think of just a healthy Greg Olsen. That's also the last time the Carolina Panthers went to the playoffs. And maybe not a coincidence that this team annually is missing the playoffs since the last time they had a healthy Greg Olsen in a tight end who actually was a primary pass catcher in this offense. The hope is Dave Canales is going to come in here. He's going to find a way to get the Carolina Panthers to have a tight end who can make some plays and for this to no longer be an endangered species in Carolina. When you look at Greg Olsen, you look at Wesley Walls, hell, you guys like Dante Rosario back in the past who can make some plays. Never forget that game in San Diego. We need that back in Carolina. I'm missing the tight end. I love watching tight ends. Like, I'm a Carolina fan as far as Tar Heels go, and I get to see some tight end play on Saturdays. Can I see it on Sunday too, please? This season, if you're going to sit here, you're going to lose, you're going to bore me to death. Can you at least give me a tight end to look at and be like, okay, that man's making some plays. So looking at it, for me, it starts and ends with the Seattle Seahawks free agents. Noah Fant, Colby Parkinson, Will Dissly, who is a cap casualty on Tuesday afternoon in Seattle. One of those 3 men needs to be here in Carolina. It appears to be, from all the things that I've read so far, that Noah Fant's going to be one of the top tight ends out there on the market. Now, and here's the thing too, let me point this out about just the Carolina Panthers and how bad they flubbed things last year. Hayden Hurst is back out on the market. Dalton Schultz was back out in the market, but he's re-signed with the Houston Texans, a team where he played really well at last year and just missed out on his incentive in the final game of the season that took the Texans to the playoffs, where, of course, they won a game against the Browns and were pretty competitive for a half against the Baltimore Ravens. The Panthers could have had Dalton Schultz last year. They didn't get Dalton Schultz. They got Hayden Hurst, and we see how things worked out in Houston. And it's a big what if. What if they hired D'Amico Ryans? What if David Tepper wasn't just laser focused on an offensive coach? What if they drafted C.J. Stroud? And what if they would have gone out and got Dalton Schultz instead of Hayden Hurst? There's a bunch of what ifs, but the hope is now with Dave Canales, Bryce Young coming up for the second year, and David Tepper getting as far away as possible from the decision-making from this team. And I'll believe that when I see it from just the results on the field. The hope is the Panthers can get things right this time around. So Noah Fant, Colby Parkinson, Will Dissly. Fant, it looks like he's going to be one of those guys that's going to get paid a lot of money. The Panthers may not be able to afford him last year. He had a 69 or 62.9 overall grade, 72.1 pass blocking grade, 32 receptions, 414 yards, 0 touchdowns, played only 1 season with Dave Canales in 2022. Colby Parkinson, who may be the most realistic option for the Carolina Panthers. He's only 25 years old too. And Fant's a young guy as well, former first-round pick out of Iowa. Colby Parkinson, he had a 57.4 overall grade, was 64.1 run blocking grade, 69.5 pass blocking grade, 25 receptions, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. Combined the last 2 seasons, he's had close to 600 yards receiving. That may be the numbers you get out of him if he can play a full season here in Carolina as that primary guy. And just looking at the two of them, Fant and Parkinson. Fant 30th tight end out of 72. Parkinson 45th out of 72. Trimble was 52nd out of 72. Hayden Hurst was 68th out of 72. The Panthers will be upgrading by getting either one of those guys. And the hope, too, is that Tommy Trimble, who Dan Morgan believes has the ability to be a pass-catching tight end here in Carolina, the hope is that he actually can be that. Now, I'm skeptical that that's going to be the case. Point me a tight end who back in college was not a primary pass catcher who then comes into the NFL and becomes that guy. I just have not seen it. I'm not saying it can't happen. It won't happen. I'm just hard-pressed to believe that Tommy Trimble is ever going to become that reliable of a receiver. Now, can he be a secondary guy that can give you 200-300 yards like we saw last season? I think that's the case. Now, he didn't even have 200 yards last season. We just have not seen that from him his first 3 years. I'm not going to put those expectations on him right now. Will Dissly would also be nice if the Carolina Panthers want to go down that road. Not quite sure whether they want to do that or not. Interior offensive line also is going to be an area the Carolina Panthers are going to want to spend some money at. According to Jeremy Fowler of ESPN.com, some good money is going to be spent on guard play this offseason. He named the Panthers as one of those teams that will be interested. Now, guys like Jonah Jackson in Detroit, Miami's Robert Hunt, New England's Mike Owinu, and Los Angeles Rams' Kevin Dotson are going to be the top of the market. And that group, according to Fowler, could command $16 million or more. The Carolina Panthers, I do not think are going to be in that market. It would be nice if they would be in that market, but looking at the cap situation right now, which is $11 million, before Dante Jackson's deal is figured out, same thing with Hayden Hurst, before that we even get there, I don't know if the Panthers are going to be able to fit either one of those contracts for those players into their salary cap this year. Now, they can push some of that money down the road, of course. I don't know if they're going to be in the market for one of the top-tier guards this offseason. Damian Lewis has been a starter the last couple of seasons in Seattle, played over 900 snaps this past season at left guard. He would make sense for the Carolina Panthers as they look at old Seattle players on the offensive side of the ball. Mitch Morse, as we look at center, because that's just guard. They need to find somebody to come in and at the very least compete with Brady Christensen. In an ideal world, Brady Christensen kicks out as a swing tackle, which the Panthers really didn't have last year. I guess it was like Larnell Coleman who would have been that guy for the Panthers, but they didn't have to utilize anybody, thankfully, because Taylor Moton, Iron Man streak, Ike Ekwonu, as poorly as he played, he was out there for all those snaps. Anyways, they need to find somebody who can be that. And Brady Christensen, as we remember, was an All-American left tackles last year, especially at BYU in 2020, blocking for Zach Wilson's blind side. Best case scenario, they're bringing somebody to replace him, and they can keep Austin Corbett there at right guard. That adds depth. That also adds talent on the offensive line. And, of course, competition. So Damian Lewis, somebody looking at left guard. There's other options out there, of course. Center, I personally would like to see the Carolina Panthers draft a center. Have not done that since 2007 with Ryan Khalil. And you look at the best teams in the NFL, and this was brought up by a former Carolina Panthers offensive lineman on Twitter in Jeff. God, I forgot his name. Jeff, you know what I'm talking about. He's the offensive line. Jeff Swartz. Jeff Swartz brought this up, how a lot of the best teams in the NFL have really good centers. Like Baltimore, they have a great center, and the dude from Iowa whose name's escaping me right now. So many names I got to remember here, folks. I should write some of this down, but sometimes it's going off the cuff. A lot of these teams have quality centers, and you see that centers just don't really bounce around the league. If they're a good one, you keep them, like we saw here in Carolina for that decade with Ryan Khalil. I would like to see the Carolina Panthers be able to get a guy like Graham Barton. Say they trade Brian Burns, and now I'm just kind of talking myself into that maybe being the best case for the team, even though I want him to stay here in Carolina. If they're able to trade Brian Burns, get a first rounder, maybe get another day 2 pick, they could be in position to get a player like a Graham Barton to come in here and to be a center. They could also go their free agent route. Mitch Morse was cut in Buffalo on Wednesday. Lloyd Cushenberry, he's also someone that's been mentioned. Evan Brown was Seattle Seahawks center last year, actually played worse according to PFF than Bradley Bozeman. Tyler Biadasz, he's no longer in Dallas. He would be make sense as a veteran center who could come in here and help out Bryce Young. The center market, it's become a little bit more robust than I think that a lot of people thought it would be before some roster, not even roster cuts, but just some salary cap casualties began to come out here over the last couple of days as we look ahead to next week. So that's some of the offensive targets and needs. Let's look at the defensive side of the ball. As Carolina Panthers have, by some metrics, a top 5 defense, but still many areas that need to be addressed heading into free agency. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. The primary focus for a lot of Panther fans heading into free agency, of course, is on the offensive side of the ball. And I get it. The Panthers at no point last season led in the fourth quarter, which is still just a hilarious and depressing stat from the 2023 season. The fact that they did that and did not go winless. They went 2-15, 2 walk-off wins, one against the Texans, the other against the Falcons in the driving rain. So we did see some positives at points in times from Bryce Young, the Packers game as well. But overall, as an offense, it was a disaster. It was complete failure, whether it was Frank Reich calling the plays or it was Thomas Brown calling the plays. The offense was highly disappointing and needs to be fixed this offseason. Now, offensive line-wise, not quite sure how much they're going to do, changing things up as Ike Ekwonu is going to stay there at left tackle. Taylor Moton will be back at right tackle. Then we'll see in the interior what exactly they do. I think Corbett's back and Christensen will be back. Will he be a starter? Doesn't feel like that's going to be what they want to do. Center, same thing with Bradley Bozeman. What do they figure out with him and whether he sticks around on the roster as competition or if they try to replace him outright, then cut him down the road? We'll see how that works out. Defensively, though, the Panthers have a solid foundation. Derek Brown was excellent last year, Pro Bowl defensive tackle, set an NFL record for tackles by a defensive tackle in NFL history. We also know J.C. Horn, when he plays, is a fantastic player. The question is, will he be healthy enough to play a full season again in 2024? It's not a matter of if, but when he'll get injured based on what we'll be seeing the first 3 years of his career. I'm hoping, praying, fingers crossed that this will be the year where he can finally hold up and show the rest of the league what he can do, because we know what he can do. Other than not stay healthy, we know he can play at a high level, but can he do it for a full season? Would love to see that this upcoming year. At safety, Von Bell, Xavier Woods as a pairing last year, playing in a new scheme. Both those guys, I thought, played really well for the Carolina Panthers when available. They also missed a handful of games as well, or just under a handful of games this past season. Solid secondary, but not a ton of depth there. And it gets hurt too when the Panthers are planning on either releasing or trading Dante Jackson. Hopefully they'll be able to trade him, get some compensation back. I would think it's probably going to be a day 3 pick, but you're losing that experience from Dante Jackson, who played and started in 16 games last year. CJ Henderson, who played a lot of snaps, he's not coming back. Troy Hill, he could come back as a veteran, but he's going to be 32 this upcoming season. Shaquille Griffin, who started a couple games towards the end of last year, replacing CJ Henderson. He's also a free agent, and is there an appetite to want to bring him back this offseason? We'll see. The Panthers are going to have to address the cornerback position this year. I think in the draft especially would be a great place. And again, you're going to bring this up about Brian Burns. Maybe it is the best thing for the Carolina Panthers to trade him, because they do. You get back in the first round, I think you got to get at least a day 2 pick out of that as well. If it's a second round pick, great. If it's a third round pick, great. You got first round pick, a second round pick, maybe 2/3, maybe it's going to be 2 second round picks. You can spend some assets there on getting a wide receiver, getting an interior offensive lineman like a center, and going out there and getting corner in the second round, hopefully maybe in third round, can come in next year and can start opposite of J.C. Horn and be that long-term option for the Carolina Panthers. It appears from some of the reporting I've read from some of the Panther beat reporters that the Panthers are not looking at it like I am with J.C. Horn, and that it is going to be an easy decision for them to go out there and actually to exercise the 5th-year option. I still wonder if that's the best thing to do, but if he is healthy finally and plays well, it can be far cheaper to pay him the fifth-year option in 2025, then it would be to do the franchise tag route, and they haven't even extended Brian Burns yet. They haven't even extended Derek Brown. I don't know how many guys you want to be dealing with when it comes to all of that. So we'll see how that works out, but they need to certainly target a corner. Interesting name that became available who has struggled with injuries the last couple of seasons is Tre'Davious White up in Buffalo. He's going to save them $10 million. So he's out on the market. Avonte Maddox, who could play a slot corner. He's someone who's out in the market, but according to the reports out there as well, the Philadelphia Eagles would like to bring him back. We'll see how the cornerback market materializes for the Carolina Panthers, but expect some older veterans like Troy Hill to come back. And then I think they're going to have to draft somebody. I feel like they got to go find somebody else who, in the interim, you can see as a starter this upcoming season. Linebacker, that is a need until the Carolina Panthers are able to re-sign Frankie Louvu. It's not just Frankie Louvu that they need to re-sign. Understand, too, that they have to replace Deion Jones, who played a lot of snaps this past season for them. Kamu Grier-Hill, they also need to replace him. He played a lot of snaps for the Carolina Panthers when Shaq Thompson went down, and in some of the little injuries, the knocks that Frankie Louvu had this past season. Pro Football Focus rates Frankie Louvu as the number one free agent linebacker. The Panthers are going to have some competition to bring him in. They want him back. I totally understand that, but this is Frankie Louvu's opportunity to finally get paid. He's been the best bargain in football one of the best bargains in football the last 2 seasons. Maybe he has been the best, but one of the best bargains in football the last 2 seasons for the Carolina Panthers, and having over 100 tackles, being a durable player who's been a leader for the Carolina Panthers team defensively, and just looking like a Panthers linebacker is supposed to look like a Dan Morgan, like a Luke Kuechly, like a Thomas Davis, of course, like a Sam Mills, a John Beeson. He has fit into that legacy of great Carolina Panther linebackers. I would love to see it for 3, 4, 5 more years. I'm just not that confident it's going to happen because he's going to be the top guy out there, and he's got to get the most money possible because this is his opportunity to get paid. And I'm not quite sure the Carolina Panthers are going to be able to pay him top dollar at the end of the day. But we will see. Some other names out there who could come in here and fill in if they do not bring back Frankie Louvu. Patrick Queen up in Baltimore, former first-round pick out of LSU. He's somebody who's still young, only 24 right now. Jordan Brooks, also a former first-round pick out there in Seattle. Maybe he wants to change the scenery, wants to come to Carolina. Had a ton of tackles. Been a tackling machine, honestly, with the Seahawks the last couple seasons. Azeez Al-Shaair was in San Francisco as that third linebacker, got the opportunity to be the top linebacker last year in Tennessee. He's someone looking for a big payday after only signing a $5 million deal with the Titans a year ago. That would be an interesting move. Josie Jewell, he's a veteran linebacker who played in Denver that lone season under Ejiro Evero when he was a DC. I would have to think that he's somebody that this coaching staff, which is the entire defensive coaching staff coming back, would be interested in if they're going to have any say at all as far as how things went in the past with collaboration. Will they be able to go out there and tell Dan Morgan and talent evaluators, these are some of the guys that we think could fit into our scheme that you should go after? So we'll see how that works out. Defensive line is another one. The Panthers, I think, need to go find somebody. We saw last year Deshaun Williams, one of those bargain bin guys who understood the system, came from Denver back home to the Carolinas to play under Ejiro Evero. Just did not give the Panthers much at all. Got outplayed by guys like Nick Thurman and LeBron Ray, who are re-signed in Carolina. I think can actually be some quality depth pieces and maybe develop into more than just rotational players, especially Nick Thurman, the way that he was able to play late in the season, especially against the Atlanta Falcons in that rain-soaked game. Derek Brown, he's great, of course, and we'll see what they get out of Shai Tuttle, who's just not somebody because of his contract that the Panthers can move on from. Wasn't a great season last year, really needs to bounce back, but the Panthers need to find some of their defensive tackle help this offseason. Edge rusher, that's the other spot. Whether they bring Brian Burns back or not, that is still a massive gap. They have not been able to replace Hassan Reddick. And there were some rumors out there that he wanted out of Philadelphia, and he disputed those on social media that was not the case, that he loves playing for his hometown team. He wants to be an Eagle, and I think it's a great story for him to go back there. And unfortunately, the Panthers didn't re-sign him, and a big reason they didn't do that was he said at Super Bowl last year that the team had other plans. Those plans were going after Deshaun Watson. We have seen how those plans have worked out for the Cleveland Browns. That's a big mistake almost made there for the Cleveland Browns. Hasn't worked out great. So the Panthers kind of dodged the bullet there, but also missed out on the opportunity to bring somebody who was an outstanding edge rusher for them that season and has been outstanding the last 2 seasons up in Philly. So the Panthers have not replaced him since he left. Brian Burns had a Pro Bowl season, 12.5 sacks a year after Hassan Reddick left. Then last year saw a dip in production, and that was due to just the thoughts of, I don't want to get injured, his contract situation not working out the way he wanted it to, and not having a ton of opportunities late in games to pin his ears back and get after the passer. Either way, Brian Burns, outstanding player for the Carolina Panthers, and if they don't have him, that is a massive hole. If they do have him, they still need to find somebody they can bring in. Who I would love to have is Bryce Huff from the New York Jets. He has been a situational pass rusher for that team the last couple of seasons, had a breakout year really this past fall with 10 sacks. He's going to get paid a lot of money by somebody just to be a third down edge rusher. He's not an every down kind of guy. The Panthers want to pay him to be that third down dude. I would love to see that. I think he's going to go for a fairly high price and not sure they can get him. Jonathan Grenard is another one who I would love to see in Carolina, was outstanding in Houston last year. He's going to command a pretty large market considering what he did last year. Now it's not going to be massive, not something I think the Carolina Panthers can't afford per se, just not know if he's the guy. Remember last year when some idiot on this podcast said that Jadeveon Clowney was just a name more than a player, and then Jadeveon Clowney went on to have 9.5 sacks this past season in Baltimore? Who said that? Must have been somebody on the mailbag. Oh, yeah, it was your boy Julian Council. Woo, boy. Yeah, so he's coming off a 2-sack season in Cleveland, and the year prior had 9 sacks. So he had 9 sacks one year, then 2 sacks, 9.5 last year. Does that mean 2.5 this upcoming season? I'm not so sure. He's an older player, but he is from the Charlotte area, and we have had this conversation whether I've been here on Locked On Panthers back when I was working at WFNZ locally in Charlotte. It feels like every year Jadeveon Clowney, for whatever reason, is bouncing around to another team. This guy, for being the #1 overall pick, has played on a lot of teams and really has not found one home since leaving Houston, who drafted him #1. He's always a part of the conversation of, let's bring him home, bring him home. Hell, bring him home if you can do that this offseason at the right price. Another guy the Carolina Panthers probably should have looked at. Don't think they ever did look at him based off what he was signed for in Buffalo. Leonard Floyd knows the coaching staff defensively, knows the system, had 10.5 sacks last season. He's 31 right now. Bring home Leonard Floyd. It's not home, but bring him here to Carolina. Didn't do it last year. You saw how it worked out when they brought in Justin Houston. Goose egg, or maybe it was a half a sack. Either way, not the kind of production that you wanted. The Panthers need to find an edge rusher. Andrew Van Ginkel from the Dolphins is another name I've also seen thrown out there. The defense was good. They need to be better in the red zone, need to be better at getting takeaways, and they need to be better getting after the passer, just getting pressure overall. That can happen if they can get some linebackers like a Patrick Queen who can help rush the passer, but also find an edge rusher who can help out Brian Burns and, of course, keep Brian Burns. Defense, good foundation, good coaching staff, great coordinator, but still can improve. And there's still some depth holes there on the team that will be filled either via free agency or down the road in the draft. One last thing before I get out of here, just kind of setting expectations. The Panthers right now, according to overthecap.com, have $11.9 million of cap space. When they release or trade Dante Jackson, that's going to open up $5.9. Releasing Hayden Hurst right now would be $52,000. So looking at the Carolina Panthers have basically $18 million of cap space, and that's before they could open up $13 million by extending Taylor Moton, and then $8 million by extending Derek Brown. They can do some restructures as well, something that they don't really want to do. That's what they've done in the past, and Dan Morgan's not trying to make the same mistakes as his mentor Scott Fitterer made here for 3 off seasons in Carolina. The Panthers, I don't think, are going to be big spenders. I have alluded to that throughout the show. They don't have a ton of space, and even when they get that cap space, they still have to save some of that cap space for their draft class. They're going to have to save some of it for in-season moves, which they don't really make that many as far as like big moves, but there are some just guys coming on and off the roster, and you never know what you want to do trade-wise at the deadline. The Panthers are going to have to save a little bit of the money that they actually have. Like $18 million right now, they may have to only have like 4 of it that they can actually use just based off of the allocations for the rookie class and for in-season moves. So they certainly need to go out there and open up some cap space. And the best way to do that is by extending Moton, extending Derek Brown, and of course, yes, extending Brian Burns, or just getting his contract out the books by trading him away. So don't expect the Panthers to go out there, sign a bunch of big names, and spend a bunch of money. They don't really have it. but I do expect him to be aggressive and trying to find some playmakers for Bryce Young and then trying to fill out some holes there on the defensive side of the ball. So stay tuned for that next week, as, of course, I'm going to be here on the show breaking it all down. But it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, right down there on the screen for the YouTube audience, at Julian Council, where I'll be back here on Friday. That's tomorrow, answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me, to get those questions into me right this instant. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Friday.